talking to Dan Titus. We're arguing about things in fantasy basketball, and Michael Bolton is an interested onlooker.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and he's done miracles on me. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. So give it a double bang and a comment and leave down below. We had a 20-man mock draft yesterday. We had 2 arguing shows with Karan Talwar and Danny Besbry. Did that. Now it's Danny Titus that we're going to talk about. And I'm just going to spend this whole time telling him all of the things that Yahoo does wrong. I'm sure he's so interested to hear that. We'll bring him in. Let's do it. Let's do it right now. All right, here he is. He's back on the show. It is the one and only, the man that they call behind the scenes, Mr. Yahoo. It is Dan Titus. Dan, now, I just preempted all the listeners that just I sneak attacking you here to tell you everything that's wrong with Yahoo and why you haven't fixed it. So let's just, I've got a list of grievances now I'm going to bring out, and I want your answers immediately, an answer for the crimes that you and the platform that you own, run, started, Yahoo Fantasy Basketball, everything that you've done wrong. So, are we ready to go?
Let's do it.
Okay. Dan, of course, if you don't know, is the fantasy basketball legend over at Yahoo Sports. No, he is not the person solely responsible for the X ranks that you see. That is a conglomerate of people, but he does have his own rankings up on the side over there. He does a bunch of great work. He does a bunch of Spotify playlists, and if you don't know how that works into fantasy basketball, well, you're missing out. You can go check that out, Dan. It is good to have you back on the show. And what we are here to do is just discuss some things in fantasy basketball. And I put this idea out here at first. I wanted people to come at me with opinions that I thought, or they thought I was incorrect about, or that I thought they were incorrect about, and we could go back and have a fight. But it turns out that I'm just right about everything, so people found it really tough to be able to do that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to find some topics in some of these, and we're going to look at them and argue both sides and talk about the merits, but how we approach these things, not necessarily that we always 100% agree. But don't worry, I'll still have plenty of negative comments that I can throw your way. And let's start it off by talking about injured players, because you go into a draft, Dan. I'll go into a draft. You'll go onto your little indie platform that you started over at Yahoo, and at the top of the list, you will always see this as you get into round 4, round 5. You'll see a guy there with a big red cross next to his name, and it will say Kristaps Porzingis is at the top of the list. And then you'll go down. The next one will be Devin, Vassell, and the next one will be, or Kawhi Leonard will be on top of those, and then there'll be Chris Middleton, and for some reason there'll be Malcolm Brogdon. There'll be a bunch of different players, and these are all guys that we know. Kawhi, we don't know, but we sort of do. But we know that these guys are not going to be available to begin the season. Some of them, Mitchell Robinson, Kristaps Porzingis, like they're going to be out maybe till December, maybe till Christmas, maybe till January. And with the example of, let's use like Porzingis and Vassell are probably the 2 big ones at the moment, because Porzingis is probably a top 30 player per game. Vassell's top 70-ish sort of a player. But if they're missing 2 months, 3 months, what do you do? Like, how do you approach that? I've got usually a relatively standard rule that if someone's missing into December, I probably won't do it if I'm inside the top 100, because I know that they're missing time. I know other guys will miss time, but I know these guys are missing time. I know there's a chance of a setback. I know there's minutes limits. I know there's back-to-backs that will probably leave them an extra 3 weeks after they return still not being fully ready to go and at their peak. Now, the argument on the other side, I guess, is that you have them healthy for the playoffs. How do you approach that? What do you do at the top of the board when all those red crosses appear?
Yeah, for me, it's I think you serve yourself best by trying to leaving the draft with all players that can contribute right away. And I understand the argument for scooping up value when it's available to you. Just, for an example, yesterday I was able to draft Devin Vassell in the 9th round, as well as Chris Middleton in the 12th round. And so for me, while I usually don't go for injured players, there's a point where it's like, all right, this has gone too far.
Yep.
I think Kristaps Porzingis is a really interesting case because realistically, his timeline is looking like December, right? But when is he going to get back up to 30 minutes? That's probably not going to happen until after the All-Star break. And if you're looking at Boston, it's like, why would we rush our star center back when we just, went through the playoffs, won the championship? They have a deep roster that can get by without Kristaps Porzingis. So he's the one guy where I'm like, I don't know that it pays to select him in like the 8th round when you can get someone that can contribute right away and get you a head start in your fantasy season. Because the last thing you want to do is playing from behind. You have a bunch of stash guys. Injuries happen all the time. Who knows if you might need to free up a spot in that IL position. So I'm more cautious on someone like Porzingis, who I know has like a 2-month timeline, versus someone like Devin Vassell, where I've already seen him starting to get back to practice. Some good positive reports have come out. While his injury is unique, it doesn't sound like he's going to be missing a month or two. So I'd be more inclined to go for Devin Vassell and someone with a short-term outlook than someone like Kristaps Porzingis, where rare injury, we don't really know where he's coming, when he's coming back, and his team doesn't have any reasoning to really rush him back.
I think you could make also the argument, though, on Vassell that the Spurs maybe don't have a full reason to rush him back. They're not playing for the playoffs necessarily. They're not playing for a title, and this is a situation where he hurt it and then it sort of didn't heal properly. Then he had to have that surgery. We can make arguments on both sides of these things, but one of the things you did mention, which is really key, right, is talking about, like, there's going to be definitely somebody, there's going to be a cohort of people who I'm loving using that word at the moment, cohort. I used to hate it, but now I'm just sprinkling it in. Sprinkling it is part of the vocab at the moment. There's going to be
very corporate of you.
Look, the synergism in me talking about cohorts is like, I got it from one of my Blue Sky sessions. It was amazing. Anyway, this is me. Never worked in a corporate setting in my entire life.
You got it, man. Especially when you drop
once.
Blue Sky, I'm like, that's like key. You're right on top of it.
Never once in a corporate setting. But anyway, that's enough sizzle for that. Let's go through and talk about this. The cohort of people will be saying, right, that Porzingis, that's fine. You put him in your IL, but you touch on it because you're going to need it, right? You can have 3 of them. That's okay. And that is true. You can put him there, but you will need those spots. And I think that, especially if you got both of those players, like Vassell and Porzingis, right? And then you load them into your IL, and then you get 2 other injuries. And you do not want to be in a position where you go, okay, invested this guy round 8, and now I've got 2 other long-term injuries. Like, I got to drop one of these guys. And you put yourself in that position by taking someone willingly that you knew was going to be hurt. If Malcolm Brogdon was good, and I had confidence that he was going to play good minutes, and he's having thumb surgery now, I'd be way more willing to take someone like that, because coming back from an upper body injury, who cares? You don't have to be limited on back-to-backs. You don't have to be limited in terms of your workload. If you're coming back from a broken hand, you just put the bloody thing on, the protective cast, and you're ready to go. If you're coming back from an issue where it's a joint, a foot, an ankle, a knee, and you've got to bang and bang and bang and bang, and the risk of re-injury is there, then that is going to take that time. And when I spoke initially with John Corrales about Porzingis' injury, he said the same thing. Like, I don't expect anywhere close to 30 minutes until like February, and that makes complete sense. On the flip side, if we're going to just argue against ourselves, you say that the Celtics are so great, they're not going to rush him back. So we go into the season, right? Al Horford goes down, knock on wood, in the second game, and they go out to a 10-10 start. Then what happens? Do they say, shit, like, we have to bring him back a little bit earlier? We can't be as cautious? Jason Tatum still can't shoot after not being able to shoot through all of the playoffs and when they're just losing. Drew Holiday is at age 34 washed. He's not, but like, this stuff can happen. We all assume Boston's going to be great. We all assume they're going to be awesome. We guess they're just going to be 10 games ahead of everyone like they were last season, but they might not be. So I guess there's a part that, and then I could also just work this into a different angle. They could push Porzingis back early, which could be great, but then he could re-injure himself, which could be bad. So I guess in the end, Dan, we can just sort of make up whatever narrative we want.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I actually think it's I feel like they'll still get by. Like Luke Cornett, Xavier Tillman, they have bodies, right? And if they need to play small, I'm sure that they can figure it out. Joe Mazzulla's style of play is, get up and down the court, launch a lot of threes. I don't know that rushing Porzingis back necessarily changes their trajectory. I think they'll just have to will through it. And they're one of the better teams in terms of like depth anyway. And one of the players that I'm high on is Peyton Pritchard. I think he could actually push for a 6 man of the year type of campaign. But they got bodies to replace him. So even if Al Horford goes down, we already know he's not playing on back-to-back. So like, I'm already expecting like a half-ass version of Al Horford anyway, because they know that they need him just as that Porzingis insurance. So I think that whether, they go out to a bad start or not, I think that they're still probably going to be pretty consistent with how they're going to approach Porzingis, just because this guy hasn't had a clean bill of health for much of his career. How much did you downgrade Kawhi Leonard after news came out that he had offseason surgery? I had him as a 3rd round pick, pretty much baking in his injury risk, but like I had to bump him to the 4th round because now it's like he's openly admitting like, bro, I got to last it to the end here. Like I'm going to be load managing. So like, how are you approaching him?
Yeah. So like people have asked me that question before. And the thing is that I didn't change anything because I already had him in that top 50 zone in the 4th round because I was already worried. And I'd been really, really clear that I'm not touching Kawhi in round 1, 2, or 3 pre-draft because it was a second meniscus injury on the same knee. There was this shenanigans around the Team USA stuff, and I just didn't trust it. And people called me a madman. They said, "You're crazy, Josh. It's Kawhi Leonard. You have to take that risk." I said, "I'm not. I'm not doing it for this very specific reason because he'd had those 2 specific knee injuries. They lie about everything with him, so I don't actually know the extent or how bad it was." And then the stupidity with Team USA. So I was already like, I am taking James Harden. I'd already taken James Harden at pick 11 in a draft before we heard Kawhi say about the surgeries. Like I'd already done that. So I'd already baked all that in. So the answer is nothing. I didn't change a single thing because I already had him in that exact same position. Because while I didn't guess that there was a surgery, I just knew that if we're going to go the balance of probabilities would tell me that it's not going to be very good here for Kawhi with that same injury on the same knee with same lying. I just don't care, and I'm not going to do it. So yeah, in the end, everyone now has come back to the same position that I am, where he sort of goes in the 40s, and yeah, I'm sitting there going, good to see you guys. I've been here for a while.
Does it change your position at all based on the league format? Because I did take Kawhi Leonard, I think, in the 3rd round of a Roto league, and I felt pretty good about it based off of my build, just because most Roto formats, like, you don't need your guys to play all the time. That's kind of why I'm not gonna say I prefer Roto because I don't, but I do see its value in certain elements. And if you have some kind of risk appetite, I think you can actually pick Kawhi, and he's like an amazing Roto player. Just the efficiencies, what he does across categories. Are you inclined to take him any earlier in Roto?
Yeah. I would be okay. Like maybe like end of the 2nd round is probably pushing it, but I actually don't think it's outrageous to do that because we all thought that. Yeah, if he played 33 minutes a night, he'd be a top 7-ish per game player this season, right? And we didn't expect him to play 70 games, and 60 would be a stretch. And I was thinking, 58, 57 probably is where I was sitting with it. So in Roto, that's totally okay. And we have this discussion a lot, and I don't want to sidetrack all of this that we're talking about how Roto can deal with injuries better than head-to-head. But it's true to a degree, but head-to-head, it's not just about like the injuries. It's about how they happen. Are you missing... Because we're back to the Porzingis discussion, does he miss just 1 game every week? Because that hurts a lot. Or if you miss 7 games, but you miss them bang in a 2-week period at the start of November, that's cool. But if you miss 2 weeks altogether on March the 20th, then you're done. So there's too much risk about that. We know Kawhi was going to miss time, but would he miss it in March? Would he miss it in November? That's why Larry Markkanen's was someone in a head-to-head where I'm going, I don't want that because the games are going to be missed. They're going to be in March and April, and that's when that is going to happen. So that leads to more of a problem. But if someone is an injury-prone player or whatever you want to say, and they miss them in October, November, it doesn't actually matter that much for head-to-head. So it's not about the difference between the two that you can take on the injuries in Roto. You can in head-to-head. But there's too many variables. It's like, is it all happening together? Is it at risk of being once a week that he's out? And when could it happen? That's where that risk is. But like I took him, Kawhi, at 58 in a head-to-head league, and I was happy with that.
Yeah, at that point, that's good value, right?
Yeah,
I'll take I'm almost 10 picks down.
And I wouldn't do it normally. And I think in that league, I was picking it like pick 9 anyway, so I'm already at some sort of a first-round disadvantage. So I thought, okay, let's see. Let's see if it just push through. And if it doesn't, I can survive that, but I'm just not going to do that any higher. We're going to come back and actually talk about the pointy end of the draft. We're going to talk about someone who wears a uniform that Kawhi used to wear. We'll get to that in a second, Dan. But today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Are you scared? I am. Of something. Everyone's scared of something. That's how it works. We all have fears, rational, irrational. It does not really matter what they are. What is important is how we react to them. And it's scary season coming up. There's skeletons on every corner. There's bats and cobwebs and the scariest of all vegetables, pumpkins. They're all around. One of the things that you should be scared of, though, is not facing your fear. And with BetterHelp, you can get in there and discuss those things and try and improve your life. You don't want to be trapped through a fear or a phobia of something. BetterHelp can be a way to address those things and start to get your life back to the position that you want it to be at. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You get in there, you fill in an online questionnaire. They say, what is your favorite and least favorite type of pumpkin? That's one of the questions. And they match you up with a therapist who is a big butternut squash fan. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But if that doesn't work, they can match you with another therapist, and that is free of charge. So take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. I'm sure BetterHelp is going to just take that ad read and put it out to all other hosts and make sure that they follow that copy exactly. I'm sure that's how that works in the old ad world. Dan, corporate legend over here. All right, so let's talk about the pointy end, because when Yahoo put out the initial rankings, it's true that Yahoo's your middle name, yeah? That's where you came up with a name for your site?
Exactly, Dan Yahoo Titus. That's it. Got it.
Related to Yahoo Serious. So back when you put out the rankings, Victor Wembanyama came out number 1. We were talking about Victor all last season, and I was like, he's going to go in the top 2 or 3 of drafts. He's going to be number 1 really quickly, and it's happened this season. And even when I put out my projections, Victor Wembanyama projects out at number 1. And then I got a question from somebody on one of my comments yesterday. I haven't answered it. I'm going to answer it here. And he says, why the hell is Wembanyama going at number 1? What does he do that is better than Nikola Jokic except for blocks? And I went,
Threes,
yes. But then I said, okay, what else? Okay, that's a decent point. It's a decent point. And it all brings back to a lot of the themes of these discussions I'm having with people in these arguments is about how rankings work and about the value of rankings and about what they're doing. Like, Victor is so far ahead in blocks, right? So far ahead. And that has a value of having a level of safety. And there's not many people who can give you a level of safety. In fact, he's probably the only one who gives you a level of safety in a single category. You can still lose it, but there's a real level of safety. But without that, Jokic is doing rebounds the same, points the same or more. He gets more assists, and actually steals are probably lower for Jokic, but his field goal percentage is way, way higher, and his free throws are stronger as well. So, that is a good question. So when we're talking about Wembanyama, who is the clear number 1 for most people, I would say, I don't know that it's as clear cut as that. People ask me this question all the time, and in the end, Dan, the answer to me is whatever. Take whichever one of these guys you want. I don't think it matters. But if you had that choice, are you just strictly going in one direction, or would you mix it up? Or who do you look at number 1, or is it just so easy to you that it is Wembanyama?
I think the market's actually gone pretty consensus with Wemby being the number 1 choice, and I agree with it just based on the upside, right? Like, if we're talking about fantasy ceiling and having the potential to be a cheat code in the game, I think he is that. He's the closest thing to that. Now, Nikola Jokic, though, is the most dominant, force we have in the NBA right now. He's a 3-time MVP. One of the things that I think, fantasy managers should start to look into more, and I know that you've been really good about pushing this agenda, is looking at the advanced data. So looking at the advanced data, like the number 1 overall pick should be Nikola Jokic. Like, this man impacts the game of basketball, which would then translate to fantasy production in a different element. Like, he's in a completely different tier than anybody else. And he's been that way for 3 or 4 years. And when his floor is top 3, whereas, like, I could see a case where, Wemby gets hurt, then you're like, oh man, why did I take the risk of this phenom, this generational talent, this alien? But I think it's worth the risk because, as you said, that block variance that he gets is just so substantially higher than anyone else's in the game that if he could quite literally contribute to every stat positively, probably except turnovers. But if he shoots 47%, that's going to be fine if you can build a roster, that has, a nice balance of high efficiency guys. On top of the ability to, get 20 and 10 easily, he can get 4 to 5 assists potentially, and he's going to get at least a steal a game. No one else is doing that. So I think you have to bet on the upside with Victor Wembanyama, and that's why I think all fantasy analysts have pretty much come around to Wembanyama as the number one guy. And frankly, if you're looking at the numbers, like this guy put up the second most fantasy points to a rookie in the modern era. The only person that was better than him was David Robinson. And if you go back and look at David Robinson's numbers, they're ridiculous.
Oh my God, they're so funny. It's
four
so funny.
stocks a game. Come on.
It's unbelievable. Looking at those numbers and you go, yeah, David Robinson was pretty good. Then it's like he averages 3.5 blocks and a steal and 15 rebounds and 30 points. You go, what was happening back then? His numbers are crazy. Him and you go to the top, and then it's Hakeem, and Robinson's not even the best defensive big man in the game because Hakeem was doing the same stuff and better at times. Those numbers back then were absolutely insane. Didn't have any controversies about scorers stat padding like Jaren Jackson, I guess, back in the day. It only comes out now about the Michael Jordan stuff. Anyway, that was crazy. Oh my God, what an off-season topic that was. The Wembanyama one is interesting because for years I have said this, and I've gone into it, and I've tried to develop different ranking systems, and even in my Durant ranking system, which tries to account for the fact that stats are non-normally distributed through the NBA, and I've made a small tweak to that formula this season. That does reduce the impact of those block numbers, and it actually means that Wemby doesn't come out as the number one player in that, because the blocks are great. You lock that down, but if you we have run into, not us necessarily, but people, and maybe it is us, have run into problems in past years and go, man, Jaren Jackson, he's a first-round player. I'm going to take Miles Turner at 15. Look at Rob Williams, let's get him in the 20s. Look at these blocks, they're unbelievable. And then they lose half.
Holmgren now.
They lose, he is one of the key ones. You lose half a block a game, and then you're the 50th best player, and you're like, what have I done? And that is all has to do with the way that stat is variable and the way it gets overvalued when it pushes above a certain area. And the difference with Wemby is he can go from 4.3 blocks and lose a block a game and still be a block better than everybody else. But that hyper concentration of value into one category is an interesting debate as to how that works through the rankings. And again, if I've got a second ranking metric, which I do, that doesn't put him at number one, then I'm going to split my difference in terms of who I'm picking at number one, because we all assume that he's just clearly number one, and the traditional numbers suggest that. But I'm not certain that it's as clear cut as that. And because of that, it's just that it is concentrated in that one category, the sizable advantage. And if that number was just pulled back, not even the blocks, but the way it's valued is just pulled back slightly, then it is more of a conversation. It is closer. And I would never let him even if I had him in those rankings, pushed him at 4, I would never let him go past 2. But I think it pushes more into a conversation of how you're valuing and how you're looking to build it out.
Yeah, I think the conservative approach is get the guy with the highest floor in the game, which is Nikola Jokic. If you're going for upside and you want to just take along on the ride of the biggest hype train we've seen probably since LeBron James, then you go for Wemby. I think it's going to be fun. He's going to have some ridiculous stat lines, 5x5 lines, which we don't see very often. He's probably going to put up a quadruple double at some point, like Hakeem Olajuwon. But there's one thing about Jokic that is undeniable. The dude is durable, and he's one of the biggest offensive hubs that we have in the game. So it's really a win-win situation. If I'm playing in a very high stakes, competitive league, I probably go with the conservative route, take Nikola Jokic, because you know what you're going to get. But I also see the argument for playing with the upside too.
I also think that Wemby's got a safe floor as well. Like, he's awesome. Like, he did this as a rookie. His floor is really safe. But in the end, Dan, the question boils down to, it's almost a semantic discussion about like how we want to rank and value these guys. Because if I'm sitting in that spot, I pick one, and I pick Wemby or I pick Jokic, you know what? They're good. Who cares? I haven't lost a single thing. I had one of the biggest W's you can get in a fantasy draft. It doesn't matter which one that I picked. If I screw that up, that's my own fault for what I do in rounds 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and on the waiver wire, or something that's completely out of my control, like a freak injury or accident, because just don't overthink it. And I've overthought this for the last 10 minutes talking about this, but who cares? Take whoever you want. You want the big skinny guy? You want the big fat ass? Like, take whoever you want. Doesn't matter. You're good either way. It is going to be, you're going to be cool. It's okay. You're not talking about Landry Shamet in round 2 like we're good. Landry Shamet's getting so much shade on these shows the last few days, but that's not what you're doing.
Who's talking about Landry Shamet right now?
It's just me. Every time I'm trying to find a funny name to say that I'm taking this guy in round 2, I just always go back to Landry Shamet because he is going to play this season. And that is, complete side note. When after the Towns trade was made, I tweeted out, they go, man, the Knicks are so thin, man. They've got no depth. You have any angry Knicks fans? What are you talking about? Our depth is amazing. We've actually got great depth. How can you say just after this trade we've got no depth? Look at our guys. We've got Kolek, we've got Dadier, we've got Shamet. I go,
Kolek
bro.
Going off in the preseason.
What are you talking? Yeah, the thinnest team that I've seen in recent memory. But anyway, that is beside the point because we've got one more thing we've got to talk about. But first of all, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You can be sitting down, you can be watching a game, you can be standing up watching a game. How your legs are positioned doesn't really matter for this instance, but you're watching the game and you see something develop. You go, hang on, I think I see a trend. Let's open the FanDuel app. Bang, there you go. All the odds are there. All the bets are there available to you. And instead of having to get your second phone, which you use for other purposes, you don't have to have them both open at the same time. You can just use the one main phone and look at all the stats. They're live. They're updating. You can look at the play-by-play. There it is as well. On the same page where you would place those bets. So put that other phone away. Let that ring for the things that it needs to ring for. And look at everything on that same screen with FanDuel. And if you are a new customer and you place a $5 bet, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So go ahead, go over to FanDuel, check out all their odds for the NFL season, upcoming NBA season, Major League Baseball playoffs. It is all happening over at FanDuel. And don't forget to gamble responsibly. Dan, how many phones do you have?
I got one, man, but I used to have the two phones thing, man. And then I was like, I don't have enough pocket space for two phones. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just too much. Which one's ringing at the runtime? It's confusing.
I have 7 phones, one for each day of the week. I only talk to this person on Monday, so when the Monday phone is off, we're done. Last question we're going to talk about is the end of drafts, and I think the answer here is relatively clear. But there are some people who don't approach it this way. There are some people who can get sucked into what I am now determining, or what I am now calling the projected standings trap, where you look at players and you'll see, and this guy is. I'm sorry for this man because he's going to have his ears burning all the way through, and Harrison Barnes has passed on the torch to Kentavious Caldwell-Pope because you can add Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in round 12 and it will make your projected standings look good. And you go, hey, look at this, guys. I won the draft. Look at me. I'm up the top. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. What an ad. What an unbelievable move for me. I added him. But in the last rounds, I don't care. I don't want to win the projected standings. I want to win the league. And getting these safe, boring, low upside players is a way that makes your team look better on paper. But I don't think that is the way that you should approach this. But and I know that in general, Dan, you're going to agree with that as an idea. But what I want to get out of you is, let's say we're using your platform's default settings, 10 starters, 3 bench players. So we have our first 10 rounds and then we're into the bench, right? With the last 3 rounds. So what do? Do you go, I want upside swings on all of these guys? I'm going to take Yves Missy or Carlo Makovic, and then I'm going to try to see what happens with Bub Carrington with one of these picks, and then I'm going to say maybe I'll chuck a sneaky Ron Holland in. Do you take, let's see what happens with those last 3 and see if that hits, or do you say, well, I'm going to take one guy here in the 13th round, and the other 2, I'll grab my Kentavious Caldwell-Popes, and then I'll grab Kentavious Caldwell-Pope 2.0 in Max Strus in the next round, and we'll see how that works. How do you balance it? Like, what do you do? Do you try and play the projected standings game a little bit? Do you mix it up, or you just say, screw it, if I can get one of these last 3 to hit top 80, then I'm good.
Yeah, I also don't play the projected standings game. Winning the draft doesn't mean anything. Most times when I get a draft grade, it's usually not the best. It's usually like a C or a D. I know I did the right thing if that's the outcome. Mainly because I don't think all ranking systems really project out how well a team is going to be. It's just looking at the projected numbers based off of one input, right? A lot of things happen in the course of a season to change the dynamic of your team, injuries, role changes, rotations, etc. My approach at the end of the draft, though, I do a combination of both. So I try to leave at least 2 spots open that's going to be potential waivers. Those will be my high upside picks, my Carlo Makovic's, the Dyson Daniels. And I usually try to balance that out with a guy that's very uninspiring, like Bobby Portis or Aaron Gordon, mainly because I think that those guys have shown a history of durability and they have substantial roles within their team's offenses. So that means something. They could be a next man up, have more opportunity. The way they're utilized, I think that they do certain things really well for fantasy that it's probably better to get someone that can contribute right away, at least for one of those spots. And then, you leave 2 spots open for, hey, man, this guy sucks. He's not really hitting. He's not getting the minutes. Let me go pick up the hottest waiver wire guy. You have to leave your draft with some flexibility to be able to make waiver moves, because you don't win your draft in the draft. You have to win your league through the in-season movements and being active on the waiver wire. And the best way to do that, if you bank on some upside in the draft, hey, maybe you hit, those guys exceed ADP, and you have like a star that potentially could take your team to the next level, or it's a draft and dump guy where you just wind up replacing them, in short order. So it's probably a combination of both, but I would at least leave at least 2 spots to hit the waivers.
Yeah, there's a couple of things in there that I find interesting with the way that you have set up your platform over at Yahoo, and the way that you have made everyone play is that there are 10 starters and 3 bench guys, but it's daily changes, right? So I've been on this run all the way through, is that you have 3 bench guys, but you have 0 bench players. You don't have a bench. Every one of these guys, with the exception of maybe one game during the week, you will play everyone that you can. In fact, you will play more than that, because you will drop guys out and you'll stream guys in. So there's no such thing as a bench or a stash or I'm going to hold it. It doesn't work. Like, you can't do it in a daily changes league. You will get cooked. And we can have limits on how many waiver wire moves you make, but you still will get cooked if you are just sitting there and go, well, if I wait until January, Joel Embiid will get hurt and then I'll be able to deploy Andre Drummond. That's cool, but like, you're getting 13 minutes a night out of 14 minutes a night out of Drummond in the meantime. Probably not that ideal. So there are numerous ways for me to do this. I like to look at it from this perspective, because we could easily take the route and say that for our 3 bench players, I'm taking flyers and upside guys, and we'll see what they do, because you're right. You do need to have the ability on there to be able to drop players to stream them in. But when you've got waiver wire acquisition limits, there becomes a limit to that as well. So if I've got 3 bench guys that I've taken upside flyers on and none of them work, in that week 1, I'll find it very difficult to be able to max out my games played in week 1. And that is often why, and I'm just sort of realizing this now as I discuss this, is often in week 1, I will lose week 1 because I'm waiting to see what settles. If this guy, I thought this guy might be in the rotation, he's not, I'll drop him and I'll grab the guy who is and is playing well. But if I have to do that 2 or 3 times, I can't use those ads for streaming. I'm doing it then to see what settles again in week 1, and then I might be at a games played disadvantage in that position. So I like to look at it. I probably do, if I've got 3 bench, I'll do a 2-1 split where I go upside, and then maybe one safer guy. But I'm also understand that in that week 1, if I need to make multiple drops to grab someone off the wire who stepped up and might be that new flyer, and that limits my weekly streaming for that week, I'm okay with taking an L in that week. Trying to be competitive, obviously, but I'm not hyper streaming through that week, because I still want to see how some stuff shakes out and see where I can maybe just grab that other upside one that I missed in the draft, or that we didn't think of in the draft, that sort of came out of nowhere. So that's how I like to approach that. It's more that I will take more upsides than safety. Sometimes I might go no safety. Sometimes I will take 1 out of the 2, or sometimes I might even use 4 of those spots. But then also understand that in week 1, I'm going to hamstring myself in terms of streaming those guys in, because I want to just be a little bit cautious. Not about like being patient with the guys I have necessarily, but like grabbing the other players and grabbing multiple of them to see what goes on. And that limits my streaming for that week.
Yeah, I think it actually correlates pretty well to how fantasy football is played, where I think fantasy managers, they leave the drafts and, you get through the first week and some people are underperforming. Some people start to panic drop, and you got to be prepared to scoop up that value when it falls. There's also situations where you'll find that I feel like when drafts really get underway, people just have this thought that like, oh, my team is just going to be this juggernaut, and I don't know. I feel like they wait too long to make moves in certain cases too. So I think it's all the matter of the risk tolerance of the player. But I find that I usually wait a week to kind of get busy, see how the dust settles, because the first week isn't everything. You still have 24 weeks left of fantasy basketball to play. So don't overreact. Scoop up the value if it's out there for you. But if you're drafting a high upside guy, it's probably going to take some time for them to, especially that's why I don't think you draft rookies, or you're not particularly high on rookies, outside of like, the Wembys and the Chets. But it's going to take time for some of these guys to hit. So you got to be patient and don't just be quick to, just drop them on the waivers.
A lot of what you said there for the uninitiated can sound contradictory, right? Because you're like, you have to be patient, but you also have to make sure you're grabbing the guys off that waiver wire in the first week, which might be the opposite of patience. But it is true that that is what you need to do. Like, I've long maintained this idea is like, be okay with taking an L in week 1 and just not overreacting, but also reacting to the right things. And that's the balance. And that's
right.
It's
that's said better.
How do you quantify it? Like, it's really hard to be able to quantify that and go like, don't panic here, but also definitely overreact and grab this guy now just to see what happens. Like, it is a hard balance to quantify. You don't want to sit there and go, well, that Josh said take an Allen this week and wait for these guys to develop, and then you sit there and you miss the pickups. But it's also possible that you could say, well, he also said to grab everyone, so like I'm going to drop my 4 worst players and grab these all hot pickups like the opening night Torian Prince from last season where he hit 5 threes or whatever in that game. Like, it's all about understanding, like, okay, that's completely fake, so don't, like, if you're adding that, you're not adding it for yesterday's game, so just settle on that one. But it's about like, that's interesting. Like, what the hell happened there? That's what we need to make that move on. And our mate, Carlo Makovic, who I still think is the best option for the Pelicans, he wasn't in their center rotation, right? He was their 4th center in.
Didn't get enough minutes, man. I'm like, where did Yves Messi just kind of just catapult him on the depth chart here? I'm still holding strong though, man.
I am holding a little bit to see what happens. So if they run that same idea where he was 4th string, even behind Jeremiah Robinson Earl, then I'm saying I'm done. Like, he might get a chance because I still believe that he is the best option for them. But if they don't believe that, and we're running in this daily changes situation where our bench is not stashable, and if he's 4th string, that means he needs to work to 3rd or 2nd, and he needs to push up, then I'm out. I'm okay. I recognize where the talent is. I recognize who he is. I believe that he's this guy, but I can't actually wait on this. So are they just going to mix it up and they start Makovic with Missy as the backup next game, or does Missy start and Tice rest? I don't know. I want to see it, but if we get a consistent thing where he comes in for the final 7 minutes with the scrubs at the end, I go, well, all right, that's not happening. At this point, I'll make a calculated decision there and let's move on to something different. But that's, again, there's the nuance that's a part of this, and that's that's what I work a million hours to try and figure out and hit the right approach on. And that's can often be hard to like fully put down to a strict set of rules or set of ideas.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be the panic drops are going to be like the Denny Avidas.
Maybe not so much now that Sharp is out, because there would have been a squeeze. There would have been a big squeeze on minutes there, but that'll be something to watch.
Yeah, those are the late round guys that I'm like, this guy's this guy's a good basketball player. Someone's just overreacting because maybe they got benched or they didn't play well in the first week, shot poorly, whatever. Those are the types of guys you want to kind of target.
There's always wildness in that first week, but Dan, if there's another place I know there is always wildness, it's with you. As you live the life of wildness out there running a multimedia company in Yahoo and setting up everything they do, it must be really, really hard for you to carve out that time as a media mogul to come on this show. But we do thank you for offering us your time and your expertise to talk about fantasy. So thank you again, Dan. What have you got cracking over at Yahoo at the moment? What are you guys putting out?
Yeah, I just dropped the fantasy basketball blueprint. Check it out. It's my attempt to kind of merge the hip hop culture and fantasy basketball. I've been trying to do it a bunch. So, Josh, you hinted at my playlist that I dropped. It's my waiver wire article, but I always put a little hint of whatever I'm listening to into that. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. Check it out. And yeah, we got drafts upcoming. So going to have more ADP Rogers and Fowler columns coming out. In addition to starting up the new pod. So hopefully getting on board with Roto World soon. And we'll be coming at you every week, talk all things fantasy. So yeah, continue to tap in, play Yahoo Fantasy when you get a chance to draft. It's a lot of fun.
So get ready for Dan to come at you. That's all coming there together. Now, just one thing on your music and your playlist. Have you ever included any Hip Hop Harry in those playlists?
Hip Hop Harry.
Oh my God. Wow. If you don't know who Hip Hop Harry is.
See, this is why I love this, because people will come and be like, "Oh, that's a really dope track, but have you heard this?" See, this is how it works. The next thing you know, you're going to see Hip Hop Harry on the Week 1 playlist. I gotta get initiated.
If Hip Hop Harry is on your Week 1 playlist, I will die laughing, because as soon as we finish this and you go look what Hip Hop Harry is, you will piss your pants. But if you can find a way to work it in, all I'll say is, like, let's go. And I am so excited to see how that pans out. Dan Titus, thank you again for coming on and chatting about Hip Hop Harry with me. And go check out Dan's stuff.
I'm so scared to look at what this is, but appreciate it, Josh.
All right, so that was Mr. Yahoo himself, the man that you can blame and praise for all of the good and bad things over at Yahoo. He did a great job creating that website and that platform. He's, look, it's a lot of work for one man, but Dan Titus is able to do it. Don't forget to head across to this channel, which I did. I didn't quite build YouTube, but at least build this channel. Hit the thumbs up and hit the subscribe and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.